Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 5, Episode 22, Children of Time. This episode aired May 5th, 1997. Before we talk about this week's episode, anything to say about the Klingon episode last week, Soldiers of the Empire?
No, it was perfect.
Yeah, it was a pretty good episode. We like a good Klingon episode.
Oh, it was a great Klingon episode. Lots of Klingon-liness about it.
Yeah, and it has really established Martog as my favorite Klingon, which is just not something I saw coming.
There is more Martog, and he is glorious.
Oh, love it. He's great.
Indeed.
So this week you decided to do the detailed notes?
Yes.
I'm just going to do the color commentary.
Oh,
I have
absolutely.
to say that this version of the work for the podcast is a lot easier. It's a lot less stressful. I'm just prepared to react. I didn't have to do all the work. Yeah, we should do this more often. That's good for me.
Okay, so should we get started?
We should.
So we start with Cisco recording a log, stardate 50814.2. So that might just be some random numbers, I'm not sure.
Yeah, more made-up numbers.
We'll probably get letters about that.
I don't know. We haven't had a lot of messages yet this season. Maybe this is the thing that will spur everybody into action.
The Defiant is returning from a week-long reconnaissance mission in the Gamma Quadrant to see if there are any planets not populated by jerks.
The answer's no.
Dax is in casual conversation with Kira and Odo, and Kira just happens to reveal that she and Shakar are no longer seeing each other. They went to the Kendra Shrine on Bajor and asked the prophets if their path would be together, and they got the answer that it would not. So they're broken up.
Asking the prophets if they're meant to walk the same path is so ridiculous. I mean, the prophets don't even understand paths, and they aren't people. And their answer was given, I'm sure, in the form of a dark migraine-induced dream, and it probably could have meant something completely different. I mean, this is just crazy to me. Because it's not like they asked the question and got a straight answer. That's not what happened.
Well, we've seen that with the prophecies. They are open to interpretation. They're kind of vague.
Yes.
I don't know how you would get a yes-no answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they've split up, and Odo, I was really impressed. He managed to refrain from standing up and shouting, yes!
Woohoo!
Yeah, exactly. But he gets very uncomfortable at this and leaves.
I was very frustrated by this scene because here are these two people who have known Odo now for a long time. They've been certainly working closely together. Yeah. And they obviously have these moments of personal conversations and downtime. Right. And when Odo walks away and Kira's like, oh, what's with him? Dax's response is something like, oh, you know how he gets uncomfortable when we have these kinds of conversations. And then that's it. They don't try to examine it. They don't talk about it in any more detail. And I feel like two actual friends, they care about the mental health of their friend, their third friend, and they would talk about it more. But no, it's no big deal. That's just Odo.
Yeah, that feels like a jump back to the earlier seasons where it's like, oh, we don't care about Odo's feelings. He doesn't have any feelings.
Exactly.
He does have feelings. You just ignore them.
He does have big feelings.
Then we go to the bridge, and Miles is telling Kira about how he's trying to instill traditional gender roles on Molly at an early age by building her a dollhouse.
Yeah.
I feel, is this another one of those scenes where they're portraying Miles as just the sort of, oh, he's the traditional values guy?
Maybe. I think, though, also, they don't know any other way to be, it seems like. Yeah. The writers really only know when it comes to families and relationships. They only know the traditional roles. Even though we're in the future, they don't seem to expand into anything else.
Interesting.
Like, you'd think he would be interested in getting her interested in engineering, the stuff he was teaching Jake. But, oh no, I'm going to build her a dollhouse.
Yeah, like, Molly and I are working on her junior first warp drive.
Yeah.
It's based on Zephyr and Cochrane's.
But look, also, maybe she loves dolls, right? It is entirely possible.
That's true.
When I was a kid, people were always trying to give me dolls. It just wasn't for me. But also, I was a kid a long time ago, and this is in the future. So it's almost like they just couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah. I guess in the same way as they seem to portray most relationships as kind of fractious.
Yes.
Moving away from social commentary, Dax finds readings of an energy barrier on a planet in a nearby system. She tells Cisco this is the only chance they have to survey the planet, and he agrees. Even though it's an energy barrier, Dax tells him that it would be plain sailing, they can easily get through it.
They're spending a lot of time trying to tell us that the crew is tired, the crew wants to go home, and Dax is like sort of forcing them to make this scientific discovery. And at the same time, they really gloss over the danger of going through this barrier. She's like, oh, it'll be fine. And they go, yeah, okay.
Well, I think that is part of the fundamental mission of Starfleet is exploration. And Dax, as the science officer, saying, we really need to look at this. Yeah. That is limit Sisko's options of, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing. I'm going to have to go along with the recommendations of my science officer.
Right.
So it's sort of understandable, even though it's like, we just want to get home.
Yeah, but they're so setting us up for failure. I mean, you see it coming a mile away.
Yes. Well, they begin to enter the energy barrier, and all of a sudden there's a surge of electricity across the ship. Kira is zapped from her console, which looks like an electrical discharge.
Yeah.
It stops abruptly, and Sisko asks if Kira is okay. She says she's fine, but Miles says they have problems with the inertial dampeners and they need a few days to repair. So Sisko stands next to Dax and says, smooth sailing, which is how she said they would get through the energy barrier. So a little bit of sarcasm.
I have a question about damper versus dampener, because the closed caption always says damper when they talk about the inertial dampeners or dampers. But I always thought it was dampener. Now I don't know which one it is.
I wonder if we have to pull the script for that episode.
Well, I've seen it before. It wasn't just this episode. I've seen Miles say damper, and we still say dampener. I'm just not sure what the mix-up is, or maybe they're interchangeable.
Well, while you were talking, I just looked it up quick, and apparently inertial dampening system is the name from it. And it also says inertial dampers or inertial dampeners.
So it could be either.
Yes. So it sounds like pick whichever one sounds best to you.
Okay, good. Then I'll probably use dampening, because the word damper is weird.
Or we could randomly select a different one.
Yeah, maybe.
Each time we say it.
Some sort of dampening system.
I see what you did there.
Thank you.
Worf then tells Sisko they are being hailed from the surface, and there are several scattered settlements with around 8,000 people who appear to be human. A woman appears on the view screen and welcomes Sisko to Gaia. Sisko is very surprised and says, "You know my name?" She replies with, "We've been expecting you." The man standing with her says they should beam down and he'll tell them the story over Aractogino.
Yeah, and he also calls him Benjamin.
They beam down into what appears to be a village square, and the two people from the view screen come to greet them and introduce themselves as Miranda O'Brien and Yedrin Dax.
Dun, dun, dun.
Miranda tells Sisko and Dax that this settlement was founded by a Starfleet vessel that crashed on the planet 200 years ago, and that ship was the Defiant. She says when they attempt to leave in 2 days' time, they are thrown back 200 years, and they are their descendants.
Yep.
Into the opening credits.
Big shocker.
That was quite an opening.
Yeah, it's a good opening. Apart from the part with Kira and Dax ignoring Odo's feelings. Apart from that, it was a very good opening.
Yes. Jadzia is scanning Yedrin and Miranda and confirms who they are. Yedrin tells Jadzia Dax has gone through 2 other hosts since her, and he also tells them he remembers all of this as if it was yesterday. A small boy comes up to Worf and asks, "Are you the son of Moog?" and asks if it's true he can kill someone just by looking at them. In a wonderfully Klingon style, Worf replies, "Only when I am angry."
Yeah, he plays up to the kid very nicely. It's cute.
Yeah. Who says Klingons don't have a sense of humor? In the meeting hall of the settlement, some children appear to be running a learning program which features Quark teaching mathematical problems.
I really thought that was funny. It was like, okay, here's how we get Armin Shimmerman in this episode.
Yes.
And he's just there for a few seconds. It's like a whole different demeanor as he's being a teacher. Oh, that was hilarious.
Well, one of the girls has Trill's markings, and the other girl is called Molly, who is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Miles O'Brien.
Creepy.
This makes Miles really uncomfortable.
Yeah, Miles is creeped out.
Yeah, he does not like any of this. Colm Meaney is great at giving this air of sort of discomfort, almost throughout this episode.
Right.
Yedrin tells them that when they crashed, they couldn't send out a distress call. It was 200 years ago, and the wormhole hadn't even been discovered. Had Starfleet been founded by that point?
I'm not sure of the exact calendar of when Starfleet had been founded, but That doesn't mean they couldn't have sent out a distress call, because there still were other spacefaring races that could have found them and helped them.
I wonder if they were being responsible here, because they would have quite advanced technology.
Well, not necessarily. For humans, yes.
Oh, that's true.
But there are going to be other... I mean, what was that Klingon race in the Sword of Kalis episode? They were super advanced, and they were a long time ago.
Yes, I know what you mean.
So I found that a little shaky, that they couldn't send out a distress call. Yes, maybe Starfleet wasn't going to find you 200 years ago before there was a wormhole.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean no one could have helped you.
Well, this might be headcanon, but they just come back from a survey mission in the Gamma Quadrant, and they had actually determined that there were no non-jerky races, so they decided not to send out the distress call.
Well, the mistake to me would have been if they had gone back to the Alpha Quadrant to humans 200 years ago with the advanced technology of the Defiant.
Oh.
Now you're changing history.
Ah, I see what you mean.
But maybe that's the whole point, is that since we went... Although, how did they know they went back in time?
Did the clocks on the Defiant, wind back?
I have to say, as good as this episode is, there's a lot of hand-waving. And this is a perfect example where we're talking ourselves into a circle over it.
Yeah. But worse is yet to come when he tells them that Kira died a few weeks after the crash. The energy discharge that she'd experienced damaged her neural pathways.
Yeah.
Sisko brings up if they know about the accident, they can avoid it. But this will cause the timeline to collapse and everyone there will cease to exist. Yedrin has a plan to create a quantum duplicate of the ship when they cross the barrier, which would be thrown back in time, meaning there'd be 2 Defiants and 2 crews, one of which would be stuck in the past. This sounds a lot like Transporter Duplicate.
I was very suspicious of this plan from the beginning.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Sisko agrees to the plan, saying, anything for you, old man.
Well, he does tell Jadzia, though, to check the math and make sure that this plan will work.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sisko knows better than to trust Dax.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. We know what symbionts are like.
Yeah.
We've been to the Trill homeworld.
Indeed.
Back on the Defiant, Kira is in sickbay, and Odo can't hold his shape because of the quantum flux on the planet. Bashir tells Kira that there are Bashirs all over the planet, to which she replies, maybe she'll stay up there then. A lot of picking on Julian.
Kira's distaste for Bashir is unwavering.
Yes. Bashir leaves, and in comes...
Hunky Odo.
Yep.
He's more confident, his hair is more defined, his features are more defined, his shirt is open to the middle of his torso. I mean, this is not the Odo we're used to.
Yeah, this is Odo looking very much more like a real human.
Yes.
And also looking like he'd taken some hints from the covers of romance novels.
Yes, that's exactly it. He somehow had this more romantic look about him. I don't know exactly how they did that, but it was a little beefcakey. It was very funny, the stark contrast between the Odo we know and this Odo.
Yes, and I think it was reinforcing that Odo as an individual would evolve over time.
Right, and that's what he said. He got better at shape-shifting.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think his confidence has grown. Maybe it's through the time that he's had to reflect on what happened with Kira.
Yeah.
Also just time, right? 200 years later, he's a different, evolved person.
Right.
I'm constantly impressed and surprised by the acting of René Auberjonois.
Yes.
When this show started, I don't know, we've talked about this before, but I had images of that actor based on other things that he had done and characters he had played that I just, had such a distaste for, like the character he played on Benson, for example. And that definitely colored the way that I viewed him on the show. But now, over time, as I see the skill that he has and how good he is at this character, it's amazing to see how just this slight change.
Right.
He acted the heck out of this. I was really impressed. And
also, don't forget, as Atiba reminded me, he was a traitor to the Federation.
Oh, right. When he played a different character.
Yes, in Undiscovered Country.
Right.
Well, Hunky Odo tells her he's gotten better at shapeshifting over the years, and that she's as beautiful as ever.
Well, sure.
He says he needs to tell her something she needs to know, something he's always wanted to tell her for 200 years, that he loves her, and he's always loved her. Boom!
Yep.
That's finally out in the open.
It was like when Rachel found out that Ross was in love with her. Shocker. Everybody else knew that, though. On here, nobody seems to know, except for Quark.
Oh, dear. Yes. She says she never knew he felt that way, and Odo says he did everything he could so she wouldn't find out. Kira is kind of taken aback by all of this.
Yeah.
He says he always wanted to be a good friend to her. As she's leaving in 2 days, he would like to spend some time with her and show her the planet of Gaia.
And, she finally has the realization that, gee, when I talk to you about my boyfriends, maybe that makes you unhappy in a way I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's the inconsistent part about Kira, of, would she be that insensitive?
Absolutely not. We have talked about this before. I really don't believe that to be true.
Yeah.
That you would be that insensitive and that, gosh, maybe this is misogynistic writing where it took the man to tell her that she wasn't being sensitive to his feelings.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a very negative way to look at it if you choose to, but no, absolutely not. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the writing was a little bit tropey, if it had to be the guy?
Or one-dimensional, that a woman can't possibly understand a man's feelings. I've had those conversations before.
Interesting and awful.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Well, Sisko has managed to find a baby, and of course is very, very happy with this, because maybe this is a great-great-great-great-grandchild?
Yeah, my notes just say, Sisko with a baby again.
Yeah.
He loves it.
He really does.
He really does. It's cute to watch him with babies.
Yep. Worf is conducting a survey of the village's infrastructure, and Bashir is doing the same thing in their clinic. He tells Worf that he's met one of his descendants. The same young boy who asked if he was a son of Moog runs up to Worf shouting, "They're here, they're Klingons." Then 2 men and a woman walk up dressed as if they were hunters in animal skins, with spears.
Yep.
One of the 3 has very prominent ridges, so is clearly a Klingon. The leader, not so much, and the woman just looks completely human.
Yeah, she even has perfect teeth, so I thought that was not exactly Klingon.
Yeah. The middle guy greets Worf with Kapla, and he announces that we are the sons of Moog.
Are you? Are all 3 of you?
Yeah, shouldn't it really be the House of Moog?
Yeah.
Considering there's right standing there is a woman. Is she one of the sons?
Yeah.
Worf asks, "Are you my descendants?" To which this guy replies, "Some by blood, some by choice. Our hearts are Klingon. We live as warriors." I really like this.
I love that you can be a Klingon by choice.
Yes.
That's pretty funny.
Well, I think I really like this idea in this society. The Klingons have become less of purely a race, but more of a way of life.
Yeah.
Sort of the way of honor.
Yeah.
So this concept has morphed over time. And I just really sort of like that as a societal evolutionary trait.
And this makes a lot of sense because I think Worf does just see this stuff as a way of life, living with honor. Yeah, I don't think that has to be something that's only for his race. In the same way, I think that he maybe respects the religious beliefs of Kira, for example.
Oh, good example, yeah.
Yeah.
The young boy says one day he will join them, and the woman replies, "When you are older, if you are worthy, you can take a Klingon name and live amongst us." Oh, isn't this awesome?
But why don't they have names?
Yeah, I had to look them up to see if they actually had names, but they don't say them.
No, yeah. There's no name mentioned.
The leader says the sons of Moog are gathering to celebrate his return, and they would be honored if he would join them. I got the feeling Worf seemed uncomfortable with meeting his descendants.
Well, it is weird.
Yeah. But Bashir, on the other hand, he seems to be loving it.
Oh, well, yeah.
Back on the Defiant, Jadzia and Yedrin are working on getting the ship ready. Yedrin tells Jadzia of how she and Worf were married, and how he's never forgotten how happy they were. This must be so weird. You're talking about a previous host.
Yeah, but saying
that you can remember, even though that's not you.
Yeah. This is strange because you're talking about yourself.
Right.
I don't know. It's very confusing.
So strange.
Yep.
And the other thing here is he seems to remember the feelings, like saying they were very happy.
Yeah.
So is this where the symbiont is letting the feelings through?
You mean like as we've discussed before that maybe the symbionts have to filter them?
Right. This is positive. I'm going to let it through.
Maybe. And there's also no one there training them in how to do something different. or forcing them to be a particular way that maybe the Trill are supposed to be. So they're just forging their own paths.
Interesting take. I wonder if when he says they were happy, maybe that is the thing of they're looking at it as an outsider. And he's saying, well, they seemed happy.
Yeah.
I don't actually feel those emotions, but it seems like they had a good time.
Yeah. But maybe from the Trill's point of view, it's like reading it in a book.
Yeah.
They knew in the story that the couple was happy. It's not that the Trill symbiont itself felt the happiness. But if we go all the way back to the episode Dax in season 1, she was feeling those feelings that Curzon felt.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, it is very confusing. So they're coming from somewhere.
God, the Trill are interesting, Cam.
But it makes the most sense if the symbiont is somehow controlling the emotions that are let out to the host to the best of its ability, because maybe it's not always able to do that.
Like with Murderous Dax.
The crazy one, yeah.
Bashir is talking to Miles, who, as I mentioned, is really enjoying this thing. And apparently he and another crew member had a very large family, as there's Bashirs all over the place. And neither of them actually know who this person is, which I thought was kind of a funny joke.
Yes.
Miles, again, is clearly uncomfortable about this whole thing. He basically tells Julian he just doesn't want to hear about it.
Well, I think he can't imagine him giving up on his own family.
Yeah.
And starting a new family.
Right.
I think later they tell him he held out 10 years, but still, from Miles's perspective, it's still today.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very hard for him to relate to.
And while this is happening, the alternative timeline, is that the right word? Molly is watching her great-great-great-grandfather. I think that's enough greats in there. We now go to Kira and Odo.
Hunky
and
Odo.
We can see a Bajoran headstone. And she says, praying over your own grave. That's got to be a new one. She tells Odo that she's always believed that you are given one path, one destiny, and they are now using technology to get around that. Odo tells her that this changes everything for the other Odo. He doesn't have to lose her.
Well, it's weird for Kira to think that using technology to build two of them and somehow change her path is like not what the prophets would want. Or that they're veering off of the prophet's set path, as if there is a set path, whatever. That's a different problem. But you could literally say that about everything, about medicine, about building shelter to protect yourself.
Have we forgotten that if you follow this set of rules, the emissary has died twice?
I guess I understand why they put that into the story. It makes sense from the perspective of this character, but it's also, if she really thought about it, she could say that about absolutely everything. And maybe she tries not to do that because it makes it seem like she's questioning her faith, which I don't think she ever does. So this is just a strange thing for her to think.
Plus, remember, she traveled back in time with Miles to find Cisco.
Yeah.
How'd you know that wasn't supposed to be the timeline in the first place? In some ways, it's kind of annoying because I think Kira, the character, would take a much more pragmatic approach to this thing. I didn't like it.
I agree. I didn't like it. I did think, though, again, with the limitations of time, they were trying to find a quick way for her to have a crisis.
Gotcha.
And I just wish they hadn't quite done it this way. Because it would make perfect sense for her to say, this doesn't make sense to save myself if it's going to risk these people that exist, right? That part does make sense.
Oh, completely.
But this other thing of, that doesn't make any sense.
Cisco is playing catch with some of the children. So they have baseball in this society.
Yeah.
When a concerned Jadzia tells him they need to talk, she's gone over the sensor logs and tells him that Yedrin has faked them.
Yep.
His plan won't work, and he's wanting to make sure they end up going back in time.
The coolest thing in this scene is when Cisco's walking away from the kids and he throws the ball behind his back. He's like the coolest captain.
After the ad break, an angry Jadzia is confronting Yedrin. Cisco asks him, what am I supposed to do? Recreate the accident and deliberately maroon my crew? Yedrin tells him that it's what's supposed to happen. He has to let history play itself out. Jadzia asks about Kira. She'll die if they don't get her back. Yedrin tells her, what is one life? A very annoyed Cisco replies with, who are you to decide who lives or dies? Who are you to make that call? Then we get to the heart of it. Yedrin tells him he was responsible for this. Dax should have scanned the barrier, but was blinded by the possibilities of a great discovery. Finally, he says, this community is my responsibility. For 2 centuries, I've watched it grow. Cisco replies, he has a duty to his people, and he will not ask Kira to sacrifice her life. for 8,000 or 8 million people? No one has the right to ask that. A disappointed, or guilty looking, I'm not sure, Jadzia stares at Yedrin for a moment and walks out.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of problems with this thing.
Yes. We have some issues.
First of all, it's absolutely the captain's responsibility, right, duty to make that call. Did everybody forget the episode of TNG where Troy is going through the command path? And remember, one of the things she has to learn is sometimes to save the ship, to save everyone, you have to send one of your crew members to their death. And it's one of the things captains have to do.
Yeah, to save the ship and the crew.
Right.
This is different. This is to save people that maybe shouldn't have existed.
Is this a temporal prime directive incident? Is Sisko's duty to preserve the current timeline with these people? Or is Sisko's duty to correct the timeline? These people shouldn't have existed.
I don't know the answer, and I would say that he doesn't really know the answer either, so he's doing what he knows his duty is, which is to protect his crew.
Right.
They don't talk about it a lot, but also he's got to be thinking, and I saw what happened to Jake before when I disappeared.
Oh, that's kind of an interesting take. He's seen this play out before.
Yes, he has.
The other thing I was thinking here is these people theoretically would be Federation citizens because it was a Starfleet ship. They were members of the Federation. So wouldn't Sisko have an obligation to protect them over his crew?
Gosh. I imagine there is something in the rule book about this kind of thing because it does seem to happen in Star Trek. But to some degree, I imagine they needed a conflict for the story. So they were making him take this sort of hard line.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about the fact that you traveling back in time and disappearing from your own timeline has an impact on another timeline as well.
Right.
The sort of prime timeline that's out there. So is that the right thing to do? Are you really protecting more people by doing that? I don't think you know the answer.
Personally, I would have preferred to see this as a temporal prime directive episode of exploring that possibility of, look, I can't go back and recreate this village. It's violating one of the things I've sworn to protect.
That is a great point. It should have come up.
Right, so you turn it into a conflict between, do I protect these people or do I protect the temporal prime directive?
It's a great point. That would have been a really good debate and conversation.
Yes.
But that's not what happens.
Right. And it would fit with Sisko. He's the captain.
Agreed.
If he tells one of his crew that they have to go on a suicide mission to save the ship, to save the Federation, it's part of his remit and it's part of the things that the Starfleet officers are supposed to understand.
Right.
Anyway.
That's good points.
Moving on. Kira and Worf are talking now, and we see a little bit more of the conflict that Kira's having here. She says all these people have to die because she needs to go back to the station, and Worf tells her not to blame herself.
Well, it's not Kira's fault. She's the totally innocent victim in this entire thing.
But it's not convincing her.
No.
Back on the planet, Worf is staring into the fire pit, which seems like a very Klingon thing to do.
Yeah.
When the Sons of Mogh come to see him again, he tells them that it's a great honor to know that his legacy has survived here. I can see the Klingon heart beat strong here. The middle guy tells Worf of his deeds and how he survived a fight with a large animal after being severely injured. They lament they will not die a warrior's death, and ceasing to exist is not worthy of Sto-vo-kor.
Yeah.
He takes out a classic-looking Klingon dagger and says to Worf, "Kill me. I have no enemies to fight, no glories to win. Give me an honorable death." They have really embraced Klingon culture, haven't they?
Yes, they have. Well, the other two do the same thing. They're all like, yes, kill us all.
Yes, they all pull out their knives.
And Worf's like, maybe later.
Worf tells them, "I will come to you tomorrow and do what you ask."
Fine.
I liked how this reinforced Klingon culture really has survived there.
Yep.
Especially when the leader says, "You honor us with your words."
Yep.
Next morning, Kira and Odo go back to her grave. She tells him she needs to see it again so she could be sure.
Yeah, somehow seeing her grave convinces her, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
I don't see how you know that.
She says this is where she belongs. The path the prophets laid out for her ends here. She says she can't go back. Not if it costs 8,000 lives. We have to let history take its course. This part for me makes sense for Kira. She is not going to let innocents die just because she's going to survive.
No, I totally get that with Kira, yes.
Kira is now telling the rest of the crew she is willing to stay. Miles is very opposed, asking if she's crazy. Worf, of course, the ever honorable warrior, says, if she is willing to sacrifice her life to save them, then I am willing to stay here. Worf is the best.
I mean, he's no Martog, but he's pretty good.
She has chosen the path of honor. I will follow her. That's very much the feeling
Right.
I got here.
Definitely.
And he tells Miles, you are afraid to face your destiny. Ooh, that was a little bit rough.
Yeah, Miles stabs back at him that he's never paid any attention to his kid.
Right.
A little bit of poking going on here.
Yeah. Sisko finally says, no, they are not considering this as a course of action.
I love it when he says that, when he says, no, we're not considering this. And Kira says, Captain. I thought at that point he should have said, emissary.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Even here, he doesn't pull that religious rank.
Never.
On
He
Kira.
never does.
It's so impressive.
Yep.
Also, I love the way when they're all being very emotional, they're giving their reasons for doing this, and Sisko just really calmly says, no, we're not considering this. Sisko is trying to be the rational, clear-headed captain in this very fraught situation where even his senior staff are divided.
I think if we can slide into leadership corner for a second,
Absolutely.
I think it's absolutely the right thing to do to hear everybody's opinion, especially
Yeah.
in something like this. Obviously, this is not a situation I'm ever going to face that's life or death.
As far as you know.
Well, I mean, with my work, it just seems highly unlikely. But it's definitely the right thing to hear out everybody's opinion and then make
Yeah.
your decision after that. I'm not saying that you are always consensus building because that's not possible. You would get stuck a lot of times if you were always just trying to get everybody to agree.
Right.
But I think it's absolutely critical as a leader to hear everyone's opinion. And my one complaint here is he says, no, we're not considering it. I actually think he should have said, I will consider it and then go away and think about it. Or if he had just said, I hear what you're all saying, but I'm sticking with this plan.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't like the way he said, no, we're not considering it. So then why are you letting us all just sit here and complain then? It just, all it's going to do is make us argue.
Yeah.
So that was my one, maybe a little bit of an issue I had with this scene.
Yeah. Back on the planet, it is planting day, and all the crew pitch in to help. Sisko is in the fields working, and Miles brings him a report telling him that the repairs have been completed. The young girl, Molly, that we saw earlier, is watching and asks Miles, aren't you going to help? Miles replies with, I'm busy. She looks at him and replies, you don't look busy. Sisko finds this very
Children.
amusing, laughing and saying, oh, she's an O'Brien, all right. I'm pretty sure Sisko has probably heard that exact thing come out of working man Miles's mouth.
Probably.
Sisko, still laughing, ropes Miles into helping with the planting. Worf then appears with the Klingons. The leader says, you promised us an enemy. Worf replies, they are attempting to plant their fields. Time is their enemy. We should help them defeat it. And so the Klingons call on the others to help. I found this interesting because this is true on more than one level. Time is really these people's enemy. Time that they need to do all their planting in this one day. And also time in terms of the timeline. If the timeline is reset
Right.
or it doesn't happen, they're gone.
Yeah.
So I thought Worf was being quite smart in giving the followers of Moog an enemy, which is time in two different ways.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a great point because he's like saying it's not that it's pointless. There is an enemy.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
Their places in Stovercore are assured.
Maybe.
Great something grandchild Molly is helping Miles and tells him that the bush or the tree they're planting will be taller than him by summer. Miles then walks up to Kira and Sisko telling them, we can't do it. We can't just let these people die. Strictly speaking, none of them would actually die. They just
Yeah.
cease to exist.
It just never would have happened.
Yeah, non-existent people don't actually die. Yedrin is now giving Jadzia the navigation logs so they can follow the exact same trajectory and get thrown back in time. Silently, Sisko and Yedrin hug, and we go back to the Defiant. On the Defiant, Odo is trying to convince Kira not to go through with this, but her mind is made up. He asks her if things might have been different. She says, maybe, and kisses him. On the bridge, they've recorded messages to their families, placed it on a probe, and Miles sends it out through the barrier. They start to break orbit, and Mars picks up an unusual temporal signature. Uh-oh, time travel. Kira confirms they're heading straight for it. Dax starts a countdown to the impact, and at 4 seconds, Kira reports they're veering away from the anomaly, and they're clear of the barrier. Miles says, someone's changed our flight plan, and then quite defensively says, it wasn't me.
Yeah, that was funny. Although, why would they have, in the original timeline, why would they have just driven right into that anomaly if they had time to veer away from it?
That's a good point.
Another little hole, another hand wave in this episode.
Sisko orders Kira to scan the surface of the planet, and she reports, no signs of settlement, it's all gone. Dax and Sisko are now discussing who could have done this. Dax thinks it could have been someone from the crew, and Sisko replies with, or used to be. He thinks it was Yedrin. Seeing them again changed his mind. Dax says, everyone we met, they never existed. And Sisko says, they existed. As long as we remember them, they always will. Which is a nice sentiment, but not a lot of comfort for the people who no longer exist.
Yes.
In Kira's quarters, Odo comes to see her. He tells her that the future Odo, or past Odo, future Odo,
Hunky Odo,
came to see him and linked with him, and now he knows everything that happened. One of the things I'm wondering about this is, wouldn't this cause some kind of temporal paradox? Oh, then again, we've seen that Star Trek doesn't really have much of a problem with temporal paradox.
No, they don't care about that.
Yeah, because there was the one where Miles, this isn't actually Miles, this is a temporal paradox Miles. My theory on that episode anyway was this actually is an alternative universe Miles. Odo says he'd come to accept that she was involved with someone else. Then everything changed. He says, I think we both need some time. He's very clinical here. He's back to the old Odo of very uncomfortable, being very clinical in the way he's talking. And then we get the big reveal. The other Odo was responsible for changing the Defiant's flight plan.
Yeah, and Kira's like, why?
Kira looks completely shocked.
Yeah.
He says, it's because he didn't want her to die and he loved you. A horrified Kira replies, that makes it right? Odo could have replied here. 8,000 solids? A small price to pay for anything.
I'm glad he didn't.
Odo tells her he doesn't know, but the other Odo thought so. And he leaves. Kira looks devastated, and we close with an external shot of the Defiant flying through space.
The end.
Okay, let's move on to overanalysis. I do not have a lot of overanalysis here.
Really?
I think we've talked about most of them.
Okay.
I mean, the first one was the prophets and the one path, which we already know isn't true. I mean, the prophets don't seem to have one path. Sisko's been on 2 that we've seen so far.
They don't even understand linear time. There's no path.
Right. Miles has already been on 2. The station was blown up in one of them, if you remember, by the Romulans, and he died 3 times in that episode. So this one path thing...
Worf went back in time. They've all done this. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. The tribbles. I feel that was so weak. It was kind of annoying. There was other ways they could do that.
You know, if they had made that an actual crisis of faith, I think it could have been a discussion.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if she had said this thing about, I always thought there was one path laid out by the prophets, but now I'm seeing that it could be anything. There are all of these other possibilities.
Yes.
And then she could have started to question, should I have broken up with Shakar? If it had been a crisis,
right.
I would have really bought into it more than
yes.
this. The prophet says I can only do one thing, so I should be dead. Well,
the alternative to that is, look, whatever happens is the prophet's path.
Yeah.
There's no, this is the single defined path that I have.
Yeah.
No, absolutely anything could be the path. That includes time travel.
Exactly. We're on the same page.
Yeah, agreed. The next thing is, and maybe this isn't an overanalysis point, and I mentioned it earlier, maybe this should have been Sisko having a crisis of duty following the Temporal Prime Directive versus saving Federation citizens. That would have been great.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't buy that, oh gosh, somebody has to die to save all these people. That's what Starfleet does all the time.
Although, Akira's not in Starfleet.
No, but she is subordinate to him.
But that doesn't mean that he can order her death.
He can order the ship that she is on, that she is an officer on, to go back in time. I feel she's under Starfleet rules when she's operating the ship.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Thank you. And my final point is, I blame Kira for all of this. When the other Odo, when Hunky Odo says, if she'd known whether things might have been different,
yeah,
she says maybe. This is where she should have said no. because then it wouldn't have changed anything. Then none of it would have mattered. But she says maybe. So this other Odo clinging on to some hope changes the timeline.
Yeah, he may have done it anyway, though.
Really?
Yeah, because he is very different than the Odo that we know.
Yeah.
And he very easily could have said, well, I will eventually evolve to be able to be open with her or something.
Yeah.
And also, if his love was really eternal, like had he not got involved in anyone else, I don't know. They don't cover that at all. So he's actually still pining for her.
Oh.
I'm not sure she could have changed his mind. It just maybe made him feel better about doing it.
Oh, okay. So this was just like a justification. He was going to save her life anyway.
Yeah, an excuse.
Oh, okay. That's a good one. I will think on that. Maybe there's also a selfish motivation for Odo, that he has been stuck on this world. He's still separated from his people, and all the people he cared about have died centuries ago.
Including Quark.
Right. And the life that he had was valuable to him.
Yeah.
So maybe there's like multiple reasons for it, and Kira was just another justification, or Kira was maybe being used as a justification. If they all die, I get my life back. And that wraps up my very short overanalysis.
Well, we talked about some of my points in overanalysis already as we've been going along here. The way that you said this was all Kira's fault, I actually was thinking it was Yedrin's fault, because if he'd never told them about the accident in the first place, they wouldn't have thought they had any decision. You know what I mean?
It makes you think maybe they could have tried to cover everything up and just say they were a human colony that had been out there for 200 years.
And we'll help you get away.
Yes.
And then when they get away, they run into the anomaly and it all happens again. That's what I mean. I think it was all his fault that he created this whole big complicated story. And he had to know that Jadzia was going to uncover it.
Right. She is pretty smart.
I blame him.
Okay. Maybe they shouldn't have even made contact with the ship.
Yeah.
I wonder if Yedrin Dax was so consumed by guilt over this thing, he felt that he needed to make sure they replicated exactly what happened, so there couldn't be any deviation.
But if we stick with the symbiont doesn't have emotion, he shouldn't be passing down the emotion of guilt.
Right.
Unless, well, wait, let's back up a minute. Maybe the symbiont passed the guilt on purpose in order to try to make this happen for survival.
Oh.
But the symbiont survives either way, so...
Why is the symbiont making Yedrin feel guilty?
Yeah, the symbiont should have protected Yedrin from that guilt.
Yeah. Or the regret, yeah.
If that's what they're capable of. I mean, that's the thing we decided. So maybe they're not capable of it, or maybe it's when it's really emotional or really strong, they're not able to compartmentalize it successfully. I guess that's maybe that makes sense.
Oh, there is another side of it as well. Maybe Yedrin wasn't really a suitable host, but there they can't do the screenings and they don't have a lot of choice.
Yeah, that's my next note, actually, is... Oh. I mean, not exactly what you're saying, but maybe since they don't have the panels or all of the maybe racist people or the bigots that say not everybody is suitable, what they've had to do to survive is just pass the symbiont down within each generation from Jadzia. Yeah. And so this whole thing, again, about how you can't have links to your past lives. Oh, it turns out it's totally fine. You can have links because we've been doing it for 200 years because we've had to. And no big deal.
Yeah.
So yet again, this shows a flaw, or at least the great lie that the Trill Society is telling themselves.
Right. I'm good with that. That's a good take, yeah.
Yeah.
What else?
No one on this planet should be or could be 100% Trill.
Correct.
So why do none of the Trill have Klingon ridges?
Maybe they just stayed away from the Klingons.
No, they all came from Dax.
Right.
Dax was the only Trill. They can't only look like Dax.
Oh, that's a good point.
If she married Worf, then at least some of the Trill should have looked like Worf. Maybe she had affairs. I don't know. But I thought, again, that a real weakness. Like, nobody thought of that. And shouldn't anyone descending also the same thing on the other side? Same thing with the Klingons. If they came from Dax and Worf, they should have Trill spots. A Klingon with trill spots would have been incredible.
Right.
A real miss.
Well, also, wouldn't some of just the regular villagers also be Klingon as well? Some by birth, some by choice.
Yeah.
Working on that principle, some of the Klingons might just want to be farmers.
That's a good point. Yeah, totally agree with that too. So that, I think, too, was maybe a little bit of a miss there.
We didn't see any Bajorans.
Yeah.
So...
It could have been Bajorans in the crew, but we didn't really address that. We were very focused on having the descendants of our, main people, I guess.
Right, yeah. That's true, we were.
So when we first arrived at this planet with the energy barrier around it, we couldn't scan through the barrier, or we didn't scan for the people on the planet. We didn't do that until we got through the barrier. And then we went, oh, there's 8,000 people here, right?
And then when they got through the barrier leaving, they were able to scan through it.
Exactly.
Because Dax was able to adjust the sensors, having made more readings from the barrier and having an understanding of it.
Hand wave. Because actually, I think what they had an opportunity to do there was to say, well, don't know, can't read through the barrier. Maybe the barrier protected the timeline change.
Oh.
I think there was a real opportunity to do something and just sort of be uncertain of what had happened. They could still feel guilty about it. But I always like those sort of uncertainties like that.
I see what you mean. They could have done it. We can't see through the barrier. We don't know what's on the other side. We are not going back through after the last time.
Yeah. And I probably wouldn't have even thought of it if they had read through the barrier in the first place. But they didn't.
Wow.
This is what I mean, where I felt like this was a really good episode. The first time I watched it, I was like, wow, what a good episode. And then the second time through, I'm like, okay, wait. Why don't the Trill have Klingon ridges? Okay, wait. I just started, poking at it, I guess, upon further scrutiny.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel the same way about this episode of there's the things they sort of waved their hands at a bit too much.
Right.
It needed to be tightened up just a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about all my other points, so I'm going to switch to women in the future. And I don't have a lot to say. Something that occurred to me kind of at the end of the episode was we're doing this historically American thing where we are only passing down the names of the men, the last names of the men. And it's a little frustrating that we're writing a show in the future and that we don't even think about that we're still sticking with that tradition. It's not a tradition in every country in the world, but I did think that was a narrow view of the future in terms of how women will be in the future. That did occur to me.
Gotcha.
And then the other part of it was, I think, again, we do a disservice to Kira and whether or not she would understand or care about Odo's feelings. And, instead they just shrug off. Her and Dax, both of them just shrug it off when Odo walks away uncomfortable and upset from their conversation. That's not well-written, well-rounded characters. But that was really all that I had about women in the future.
Yep.
So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
My rating is a thumbs up. I really enjoyed this episode. Even with its flaws, I still really like the feel of this episode. It could be tightened up. Yes, there's things they could improve. I didn't like some of the stuff they did with Kira. But overall, the episode was very enjoyable. And it was good sci-fi as well as being good Star Trek.
I totally agree. I thought it was a very enjoyable episode. I like the story. I like the thing that they were trying to tell or, what they were trying to do with the characters. I thought that was very cool. There were just some plot points that I think they needed to work on a little bit more. They needed to workshop them a little bit more. But overall, thumbs up.
Agreed.
Good performances, especially again from Renee Aubergenois, who just manages to reinvent Odo at every opportunity that they give him. And it's just, I couldn't be more impressed.
Yeah.
Okay, that wraps up Season 5, Episode 22. Come back next week for Episode 23. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at rebingeit. You can also check us out on Instagram and YouTube at rebingeit. And you can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com, where you can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can also listen to the other podcasts in our network. Additionally, if you would like to support the podcast, you can support patreon.com/Star Trek TTM. That doesn't just support our podcast, it supports all the Star Trek podcasts on our network.
thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.